good evening or good afternoon to you all. My name is Lien Reesterhove. I'm working for the Research Institute for Nature and Forest in Belgium, and I'm the convener of this task group. I am mainly working on invasive alien species and the combination with data standards. So I've been involved in several projects, also including Quintin, with respect to setting up reproducible pipelines for publishing occurrence data to GBIF, but also to publish the Global Register of Invasive and Introduced Species, so the GRIS checklist to GBIF. We're involved in setting up several tools like an early alert tool, management reporting tool. So yes, I'm kind of the data scientist working on invasive alien species. I'm also like very sidetracked on camera trapping, but my main focus is in invasive alien species. So what I was planning to do in this session is just give a short overview of the task group. So why are we here and what would we like to do in the coming year or years of this task group? So I will just share my screen with you so you can see the presentation.
Make sure.
Yes. Okay. So you should be able to see my screen. Do you see? Well, you don't probably see the slideshow yet. So, do you see the slideshow at this point? Okay, thanks. I'm just going to focus a bit on the context, on what we already have done, and on the road ahead. So the context, probably all are aware of the problems of invasive alien species, and that it takes a lot of effort to manage these species. It takes a lot of finances, has a huge impact both on biodiversity but also economically. I don't need to say that it's very important to have data and to work on indicators and to improve the situation as it currently is. Um, for instance, at our lab, so the Open Science Lab for Biodiversity, one of the tools we make for early detection and rapid response is we have developed a tool that is an early alert tool where we display the occurrences of invasive alien species in Belgium. And for this, you need to aggregate the data. We use GBIF as a data aggregator. And through GBIF, we can actually combine the data from different data sets and display it here on the map. That brings us to a challenge in this way that we need to combine different data sets. And there comes the problem of interoperability. So we made the exercise for Belgium. There are lots of data sources that are stored in Excel or in a database or just like manual written on a paper. So lots of difficulties to get the data published to GBIF so we can actually aggregate them. And this task group originally started with a specific focus on management actions. So for observations of invasive alien species, the Darwin Core archives work pretty well. You can publish information about a specific species at location at a specific time point to GBIF. That's not a problem. The thing is that if you're going to the management, it gets a bit more problematic. So with the management action, I mean someone going into the field, extracting a specific species from the field, someone trapping a crayfish species. So the dormant core at this point doesn't make us able to capture this information, especially about the actions. So using materials, reporting on the non-target impacts. These are all things that we cannot include in the Darwin Core archives at this point yet. Also, reporting about impact of an invasive alien species is not possible yet. So that's why there was a need for the task group on invasive alien species, and it originally had to focus on the management of invasive alien species, but we decided to keep the scope more open. So we now will consider every piece of information related to species occurrences, management actions, but also to species lists for a good screening of what is out there and what is not covered by the Darwin Core standard at this point. And it's important not to confuse this task group with the task group that Quinten was actually responsible for. So it's the invasive organism information task group. And if I'm not mistaken, Quinten, that one is not active anymore.
No, but I put the publication that came out of it into the chat because I thought people would be interested.
Yes, thank you. So, what the final output of this task group was a new German core pathway. I think it was a revision of the establishment means vocabulary and a new term degree of establishment, which included information about I'm not sure if I could use the word invasiveness of a species. Like, is it established? Is it's it's dangerous to use that word, I think. But it's how well a population is settled, I guess. Quentin, correct me if
Yeah,
I'm wrong.
it's not really of the species. It's of when you see make an observation of something in the field, how well is it established at that location? So
Yes, thanks. Thanks for the correction. Um, so the task group is this task group, the goals are achieved. So now there's a new task group about invasive alien species that I am convening. So the road ahead was we planned the task group kicked off in September 2024, right after the TED Week conference in Okinawa. And the goal was to first start gathering use cases, and we wanted to have the use cases ready by the end of 2024. Well, that was a bit an underestimation of the time because we're still gathering use cases. And especially the reason is that we are working with a survey. So we wanted to know first who managed the data, who has occurrence data, who has invasive alien species records, and we decided also to team up with the GBIF task group of invasive alien species. So there's not only the TEDWIC task group on invasive alien species, but also a task group within GBIF, which focuses on mobilizing and improving biodiversity data for invasive alien species research and policy. And data standards is also part of that task group, although not that focused as it is here in this task group, of course. But so we teamed up with the GBIF task group, so the scope of the survey is a bit broader. And if you are interested to complete the survey, there's a QR code in the right corner of this presentation. So please feel free. Every response is very valuable. So the survey is still open, and we now have about 119 responses. Not all of them are useful, but quite a lot of them are. So what is the idea with the survey? We wanted to know who is involved in recording in invasive alien species data. So with recording, I mean entering the data in a structured way in a database, in the data using, for instance, a data dictionary. So that's the focus of this survey. And what did we want to know? We basically want to know what information is included in this database. So one of the questions was, does your occurrence record include information about, for instance, collection protocol? I'm sorry for the layout of the graph. It's SurveyMonkey that made it, not me. I couldn't change it. But so verification method, verification status, ownership. So is a land private or is it public? About absences of invasive alien species, the degree of establishment. So is it established? Is it invasive, casual? Trophic interactions with other species or other impacts of invasive alien species on the environment and welfare status. So, and also what we wanted to know, does your database use controlled vocabulary for? We don't ask the specific details, so not give me which controlled vocabularies you have, but we just wanted to know, do you use controlled vocabularies, yes or no? And one of the most important questions for the survey is, for me, can you share an export of your database schema, content, database dictionary, or data collection template with this task group? So from the moment we know that people are using specific vocabularies for specific terms, if they are focusing on, for instance, management actions only, these are interesting databases for us. So it's good to know that we can contact those persons to perhaps have a screenshot or to have like a sample of their data and then start digging into the details. So what we are really doing now is to identify the data holders and what is in their data. So we focus on species occurrences, management actions, and also on species lists. So we have 119 responses up to now. What I see now is that most responses are from plant species, also terrestrial species. I didn't think that was very surprising. And that there's a very good division between the different spatial levels. So there are responses from local level, but also on the regional, the national, and even the international level, which is quite good. So what is next? So we're almost finished. Well, not finished, but we have a lot of use cases already. So what we are planning to do now is to review those use cases. So what I would like to do is start contacting the database owners identified through the survey, and then start writing down these use cases in words. So create a narrative description for, so we can really dive into the details of each use case. So this is an example I made for the mechanical removal of invasive trees and shrubs in Belgium. So each line, each paragraph in this use case is actually one line in the database, and goes very much into detail about what is going on, so that we understand as good as we can this use case. So I hope in the next meeting of this task group, we can start dividing the work to do this, because this will also take some time. I think that we could have this ready by the next that week meeting in 2025, but I'm always a bit careful when I start planning deadlines, because the deadline for the use cases was already passed a long time ago. But this is what I would like to do in the near future, because having these use cases, we can actually start comparing this information with what is in Darwin Core Standard at this point. So, for instance, here you see an example of the different fields we try to identify in one of our use cases we already had. And we try to say, okay, for instance, there's a field in use case one, it's called action ID. That's the same as an event ID in Darwin Core. About the methods, there's nothing, there's no field called main method or sub method in Darwin Core, but there is a field sampling protocol. But it would be the same. There's no distinction between the main methods applied to an management action or a sub method. Same thing for sampling efforts. There's no field for the type, there's no field for unit or values. Same for instance, bycatch species. You could, I think, use associated occurrences in Darwin Core. So there are some fields that needs revision, or there are some extra fields that need to be created. And by going through each of these use cases, we can actually start identifying what are the gaps and what could be improved. Um, and then there's a link with the Global Biodiversity Framework. The target 6 indicators for to reduce the introduction and impact of invasive alien species. So one of the questions we would like to see answered as well is do we have the data to answer or to make these indicators? Does the Darwin Core standard cover all the needs to automatically generate these identifiers, to accumulate data, to aggregate data from GBIF, so to set up automated pipelines to do this as reproducible as possible? So this is also something we will need to consider in this task group if the Darwin Core standards does contain the amount of fields needed to include, well, to calculate these target 6 indicators. So and then there's what we call manias. So it's the invasive alien species management data, well, preliminary data exchange format we already made in our team. So we already had an idea of how a data exchange format for invasive alien species would look like. It's published on GitHub. How does this model fits within the Darwin Core standards? So these are all, it's just about comparing. So comparing the use cases, seeing if all the information for the Global Biodiversity Framework is included, and if the work we have done so far is also matches the Darwin Core standards. And the next step is then, if we identify the gaps and what could be improved in the Darwin Core standard, is to propose to extend it. That's, for me, that's a story for 2026. So I think one last thing to mention here is that we are also having a session in Bogota in the Living Data 2025. So where we are going to focus on these things and also going to present the work of this task group. So there are some questions, of course, there are lots of questions, but I just put some slides here. So I think we really need to consider how this work can support the target 6 indicators for the Global Biodiversity Framework. More on the technical side, how many use cases do we need to really start doing some useful stuff? And how does this work relate to the current initiatives with respect to the Darwin Core Archives version 2, frictionless data? And yeah, I think this is really a question for me. I'm always open for funding opportunities. So this is also an outstanding question, but maybe this is more a question for me, but it's always useful to see where other people get the funds to do this work. But I think in a very small nutshell, this is what the task group has been doing and is planning to do. So I'm not sure at this point if there are any questions or remarks. Just go ahead, and I don't really have anything prepared anymore at this point. So yeah, just feel free to ask any questions.
Can you maybe explain a little more about your last question there, the relation of the Darwin Core Archives version 2? I assume you mean the Darwin Core data package and frictionless data?
Yeah, well, because I'm not sure where this is going. I suppose this will be presented at the TED Week conference in Bogota.
Yeah.
But what I would really like to see in the near future is just to have like a data exchange format for invasive alien species only. So I think I'm thinking about the ChemTrap-DP work
Yeah.
because that's data exchange format really focusing on camera trap data. And ideally, I think it would be great to have like a data exchange format for invasive alien species as well. And but I think that is where the Darwin Core archives and are going to, right? So that's
Yes, absolutely.
yes, yes. So I think I am, if I'm correct, it will also break the star schema.
Yes.
Yes, so it would be great to have a data exchange format for like that people that not familiar with Darwin Core and all these things, they could easily between brackets understand the format and not going have to go through all the other Darwin core terms. So but as this is going on, this is great news.
It might be you had that slide, Lynn, of the target 6
Yes. Should I go
virtue
back?
screen there, and
Yes.
just sort of zooming in to those indicators there. I wonder if Lee and Victor can see them. They're pretty small, but um,
Sorry.
I'm not sure if you've looked at these indicators, but obviously to achieve target 6, things just like the rate of invasive alien species establishment is even that's quite difficult because it's establishment, not actually that somebody's seen it growing there, but it actually has to be established, and we don't keep those kind of data normally. You have to kind of infer that it's established most of the time. And then some of these other ones,
Is there criteria for that to determine if it's established? Sort of like self.
well, we've got the degree of establishment, but very rarely do people actually use it. So, I mean,
Yeah.
obviously, encouraging people to use that term would be really helpful.
Yes.
Um, And then you've got the rate of invasive species impact and the rate of impact. I have no idea what the rate of impact means. I mean, I guess that's the sort of how impactful it is. Um, yeah, I guess that's the different types of impact and the rate of impact, but we have very little data to achieve that indicator. And does anyone know how you might even begin and what data you might use?
I mean, it's species to species, right? I mean, if you have it's certainly different than a plant versus an animal.
Most of it's species to species, but not all of
Right.
it. There's physical changes that also happen and chemical changes of invasive species. Um, and then rate of invasive alien species spread. Well, you could look at occupancy grids and things.
Yes.
Still not that
Yeah.
easy, but we probably have the data to do that. Numbers of invasive alien species introduction events. So if the data were available, then you could look at things like rates of interception at ports and things like that,
Yes.
and
Mm.
airports and things. But often those data are not that reliable and hard to get hold of.
I also wonder if are these new species introductions or just could it be like a species that is has been observed in a country and has been re-imported again? Do you know?
I don't think that's specified.
Mm.
But
Yeah, they feel very vague to me.
yeah, the number of invasive alien species. I mean, they're made intentionally kind of vague to try and lower the bar for each country to try and achieve them. But on the other hand, it makes it difficult to compare between countries if everyone's making up their own interpretation of these.
Mm.
Sure. Sure.
Yeah.
There
Then
are there are some introductory events you could take. Because I know in the United States, the Shakespearean birds were let go in Central Park at the turn, if I'm right, at the 20th century. And one of them was European starlings. And now you can actually track where European starlings are from those released in Central Park at the Shakespeare big event. And they just sort of went across the United States. But that's a well documented time where somebody had a great idea to do that. Mongooses in Hawaii too. trying to take out
Mm,
certain things. But you'd have to
okay.
know like if they
Mm,
they were intentionally released. You know what I mean? They weren't just like accidentally appointed. They just were like, before people knew.
Yeah, for some species, it's multiple introduction events as well. And then number of invasive alien species on the GRIS lists. That's fairly straightforward.
yes.
Lynn was explaining how she was involved a lot in updating the GRIS list for Belgium, and we're trying to roll that out to more countries in a way because part of the problem with GRIS is it's not being updated on a regular basis, and
Yeah.
so we are trying to improve that. If you're interested in GRIS checklists,
Do you guys think about plants differently than animals? Things that move versus things that don't move?
in what respect?
And what like the criteria for establishing these sort of rates and spread and these kinds of things that versus a plant versus an animal about how things are the rate of what word am I looking for? So rate of the rate of spread, number of introduction events, these sorts of things. It seems like there's a big contrast between animals and plants, and the way you might calculate these things might be different between the two.
Yeah,
Maybe it's just me.
especially very mobile animals makes spread very difficult because things like a single bird, especially a single rare bird, gets observed all over the place. Um, it- I don't know if you're in the northeast of the United States, there's a Steller sea eagle, and it's got as many records, that one bird, as in Kamchatka, where they all
Does it
come
really?
from. Because they have boats going out to see it and things like that. So, yeah. So yeah, it's difficult in some respects to look at things like spread, especially for rare birds. But they're kind of exceptional. I mean, most things you could do with spread
Well,
for.
I suppose a spread for animals would be faster, or is that naive to think? I remember for Vespa velutina, it was like a bang, and it's
Yeah,
one or a few species resulted in a huge invasion. So I couldn't see that happening with plants, but I'm not the expert in that. So
I want to say
um,
yes, but I have this feeling there's some exception to that, right? There's some
yeah.
pollen event that just spreads it all over the place.
Mm,
it does depend on dispersal a bit. Things like plants that grow due to salting on roads, and they transfer along roads extremely rapidly because yeah, as a victor.
I'll tell you what, I'll give you an example. Pythons in the Everglades. Pythons have a very limited range for which they can survive in the United States, and you do not find them beyond that range. And so there's a natural sort of boundary
mm.
on where they are. So the rate they get higher concentrated in this one area, but they're not in, Alabama or Georgia or something. They're not really moving. Victor has a question.
Yes.
No, I only wanted to tell you that I just place a link in the chat where you can see like the metadata from some of the indicators. That is the
Ah,
indicator says one from that I think you were asking.
oh, that's good.
Okay.
So that does have a bit more detail.
Hmm. Okay. Thanks for sharing. Um, I
So
was also
yeah,
so go
I have
ahead.
a question. Yeah. Yeah, very interesting presentation. So in terms of plants, are there particular framework you use to record those invasive species in terms of observation? I know that maybe all the data are piped into GBIF, but in terms of observation, are there particular framework?
I'm not sure how to answer that question. Quentin, do you have any idea?
Uh, so let's say in GBIF, how is invasive species tagged?
Well,
How
so
uh,
there's a field establishment means.
mm,
So that specific Darwin core field includes how the population is established within a specific area. So there's you could say it's established just or casual, reproducing, colonizing, and then I think the last or the one of the last options between brackets is invasive and highly invasive, I think.
okay. Mm,
So I suppose if that information is provided, you could know that a certain species is actually invasive. The problem is that this information is not always provided.
Mm.
So what we sometimes do is we use a filter. So we have the European list of union concern, and based on that species list, we could also say something if a new occurrence is detected based on the scientific name that species is invasive. But other than that, so the information in establishment means, or whether your species is listed on one of the uh, official species lists of invasive alien species. I don't think there's another way to identify this species.
Mm. So
Correct. Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, where are these data coming from? So what are the sources of for the data in the GBIF?
It's very
Oh,
diverse.
very diverse.
Yes, so there's the big data sets. So are we speaking about observations or species lists? It's
Yeah,
also
observations.
yes. For instance, there are the big citizen science
Mm,
platforms. iNaturalist, for instance,
mm, mm.
data, the expert. Well, no, the validated data. I think. Correct me if I'm wrong, Quinton, but that information is published to GBIF. Then there are all the small local sources, for instance, in Belgium. They are also published to GBIF. So this is it's there's a high diversity. The big
The
citizen science,
museums, and specimens from that
yes.
area.
Mm.
There's
And
eDNA data, but it's very heterogeneous, extremely heterogeneous, not the same
and
everywhere.
yeah, so go ahead. So when they send the data and that particular is it's not guaranteed that they will send that this is an invasive species, the indicator. And it has to be post-processed by GBIF or somehow um, to label the data. Is that correct?
Well, we do have the GRIS checklists, that's the global register of introduced and invasive species,
Oh,
which are lists of which species are non-native or potentially invasive to each individual country. And so even if the observation doesn't say it's non-native, we kind of link the lists together so we can tell which ones are the non-native ones.
oh, thank you. Thank you. That's very helpful. Thank you.
Yes, so that's what we do in our projects. For instance, the tool that I showed you in the beginning of this presentation is that so we use all the observations of species in Belgium. So not well, initially not filtering on whether they are invasive or not, and then we use the GRIS, so the Global Register for Invasive and Introduced Species in Belgium. We use that list to filter out the invasive ones, and then based on merging of this information, we can actually see the occurrences of invasive species in Belgium.
Thank you.
It's always at country level for the information?
Chris is
Not entirely. There's a
it's like island information also or states. It's not always the boundaries of a country, but I think
Right.
most of the cases are.
and they've started doing a few for protected areas as well, I think.
Yes. Yeah, and I know they are updating the list or they are planning to update the list, but yeah, we are trying to make, for instance, a GRIS checklist for Europe. So what we want to do is we want to have all country level GRIS checklists for Europe merged into one single GRIS checklist for alien species in Europe. So that would be really cool to do so that we can filter on invasive aliens occurrences in Europe and have an early alert system for Europe set up. That's the idea. Well, what we're trying to do now in a project, Quinton and I together.
Is there ever an instance where something is an invasive? I mean, the scale is pretty small for European countries, but is there a situation where in the southern part of the country it's not invasive, but the northern part it is? Does that ever occur, or is it just too small scale to ever really have that encounter that?
Oh, even in Belgium, we have species
Yeah.
that in the southern part are invasive. I think raccoon is or they
Coming this way,
occur.
though.
Sorry?
It's coming this way.
Yes, it's coming this way, yes, but I think the status is different, right? So they are established in the southern part of the country, but in the northern part, the Flemish part, they are not established yet, but they are coming. Yeah.
I
But
think maybe the other way to phrase it is that in some places they're considered invasive, but in the other part of the country they're not invasive. They're not considered invasive.
There are not many cases in Europe. For instance, there are a few species I know in Australia where they're actually native species, but in parts of the
Right.
non-native range within Australia,
Yeah.
they're invasive. And Pittosporum is there's a Pittosporum species like that, which is native to Australia, but not everywhere that it grows. And I guess you have someone like that in the USA as well.
I'm sure.
mm,
There's some like Oxalis pes capri, which I can grow in the south of France, which just climatically not capable of living in the north for any length of time. So,
mm.
So there's species of trees in the United States that are like that.
Could anyone send the list to the chat if it's inconvenient?
the list of
The invasive species.
like
The Gris, you mean?
Yeah. Maybe
oh,
a pointer to it.
Yeah, I think maybe I have my screen
one,
share here.
I can do it. Lisha, which country are you from? Because there's one for each country. So
Oh, USA.
you're in USA too.
Mm.
So, let's find it. Here it is.
You just want to get an idea, learn
Yeah.
more about the area. Thank you.
So, and that's the contiguous states. So I guess they've done Hawaii and Alaska separately for obvious reasons.
Mm. I was also wondering, so I'm on the CBD online forum. Also about invasive alien species, and it was also mentioned that impact is another important importantly missing from the Darwin core standards. I don't have too much experience with that at this point, but I know there's the ICAT, but there's not an option to include ICAT information into Darwin core, right? Or am I wrong?
Sorry, could you
Maybe.
say again, Lena? It's just
Yeah,
but
I was mentioning the reporting of impact information in Darwin Core archives or Darwin Core standards. I know there's the ICAT. Did I pronounce that correct? ACAT.
that's a
Uh,
completely different standard, though. But
but is there a way to include impact information into Darwin Core?
not really. No, I mean you can put the interactions with other species in there, so something eats something else,
Mm,
but you can't put the magnitude of that impact or anything like that. That doesn't really help. I was
mm.
going to say to Lee, the first link I gave you was not really right. The second link is the better one. The first link is the how it's published to GBIF, and the second link is the actual GBIF GRIS checklist for the United States.
Thank you, Kunti. Thank you.
And so if you click on the occurrences or the records, then it should give you the full list.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
So yeah, I think impact is very difficult. So the ICAT assessments are done through the IUCN, and they do global ICAT assessment. So that's looking at the impact globally of a particular species. and they're really reports written by humans for other humans to read, and also require evidence for everything. So it needs this published, peer-reviewed, citational type evidence for everything. So writing one ICAT global ICAT assessment is quite a lot of work to be able to do. And part of the problem, I guess, it'd be interesting to think about is how you can do impact assessments a lot quicker, because yeah, at this rate, yeah, we're not getting anywhere very fast by doing impact assessments where it's taking a month or two for someone to do write one. So
So that's where the large language models come in to,
possibly, yeah.
yeah.
I'll see if I can find that.
Okay. Any other questions or remarks?
So what is the next goal for the group? The
The
immediate future?
next, yeah, the next goal is to try to make something useful of the information we got from the survey. So, for I would like for occurrence data, for management data, and for species lists. For each of these categories, I would like to have a few use cases written out, so that we can start digging into the details and compare that to what is included in Darwin Core. I'm a bit struggling with how many use cases we need to start doing something useful. But yeah, as people's time is limited, I don't think we can go too big. But I hope as at least 3 or 4 use cases per type, so for occurrences, for management, and for species lists would give us a good start. But I have no experience in this, so that was one of my big questions. How much information do we need? How long do we need to wait before we can start actually proposing changes to the Darwin core standards? And especially to avoid that, like 2 months later, there's like a big data set popping up, having a completely different structure, and then just all the work undone. So yeah, I'm struggling with that. So any advice on that would be great.
Did you have anything already in mind that you're for changes to Darwin Core? Have you not got anything specific in mind you're hoping to hit?
Yeah, I do have something in mind. I want to have the management actions, so methods especially included. So I see at this point like a term, not methodology, but something alike. It says chemical treatment, mechanical removal, manual removal, species interaction, also something like that. That's a very important one for me and something that is lacking at this point. So information about methods, materials, working hours, but I do think the Humboldt extension gives you the opportunity
Would
to.
those management actions be part of like the event core of Darwin Core? So you went to a site, you did your management action, you would
Yes.
record whether the species was still present or something like this, and
Well, it's different. I think when you do an action, you perform an action, then you say, I removed one species from the fields. So at this point, if you publish it to GBIF, you would see a record like one species, XY coordinate, but you wouldn't know that it's removed. So making that distinction already is important to indicate that it's being removed and not that you saw it, of course, but for people to see the data to know that it's not there anymore. But also a vocabulary for methods.
we have I think going into the new Darwin core, the last review, we have cause of death, which doesn't come with a vocabulary. So I can put the link into the chat. But the idea behind that was for things like when you're recording roadkill, bird strikes, other kinds of wildlife death, that you could at least record the cause of death, and that could be some. Ideally, that would have a vocabulary. The problem was when we tried to work on the vocabulary, that got extremely long and difficult. But
Yeah, I think for plant species, how would you, cause of death is not really applicable, right? If you remove
if you know it's herbicide, then
or just digging a plant out or just I don't know, every mechanical movement, that's a bit strange for me to
well,
say.
the cause of death is removal, I guess.
Yeah, for me it feels like more it's thing for animals, but I might be mistaken.
Yeah.
The thing is also I think there are lots. Well, there are a few very clearly defined categories when you're performing management actions, and those are it's the mechanical removal, it's the manual removal, chemical, and then there's the biotic interactions. So for me, these are very clear categories. So I hope we could get those included somehow into the standards. But yeah, of course we should.
Could you use the cause of death, and give it some a standard vocabulary, or do you want something else for management? And this is very simplistic, just putting a term into cause of death, that's for sure, because you don't know too much about that management action itself. But might it be
Yeah, it's
hard to
also,
come
for
direction?
instance, I think it's more complex than that. What if you trap a rat and it's not dead? So how would you report it? It's a trapping, and you remove the rat, but it's not dead. So I think it's more complex.
Yes. Oh, I see you were actually one of the submitters of the cause of death originally.
Yeah, well, I think it's a very, very
Yeah,
good.
no, it's useful, but yeah.
Yes, I
No, I
I
realize
don't.
it's not everything you want, but it is something.
Yes, I think it's very meaningful for you could you certainly will need to combine it with the management action information. But I think management actions are broader than reporting a cause of death. Mm. But
Yeah.
it should be included. I agree. But I think it will need some time to, I think that will be the difficult task for now. So we now have the use cases and we now have to figure out which existing Darwin core terms are useful, including cause of death, but what else is missing?
Maybe Lee or Victor have some. Do you hold data on things like this?
Not specifically for behaving species, but we have like some strandings a data set that have like the information on how the individual died.
Right.
Okay, that's useful for that field. Lee, you wanted to say something?
Oh,
Oh, you're muted now.
I was just replying to Quentin's question. If no, we don't. Yeah, we do some observations, but nothing like recording anything being removed or anything like that. No, not currently.
So, what are your invasive species of interest?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the framework we have could doing help with the invasive species, especially in terms of education. You know, have public awareness of the kind of invasive species in the surrounding. That's what I think. I think it's very informational to listen to this talk. Yeah, in terms of the work we have, the project we have, how we can contribute, it's more on the educational side, I think. Yeah, can help people be aware of the invasive species, educate them, and that can contribute to the control of the invasive species, especially. But by the way, we are in the plant field, so it's more of the invasive plants. How maybe we can do something around that. Yeah.
Something, yeah, certainly in the project I have with Lynn is people's attitude towards invasive species, because unless people are willing to control the species, then you might as well give up. So if a plant looks particularly pretty and people like the plant, or if it's a cuddly creature and or in Belgium we have a lot of invasive parrots, for instance, and
Mm.
people like feeding them on the bird feeders, and they're very excited when they see them come. So it's a very difficult situation because we cannot control them because they're too popular.
Yeah, yeah.
People are
And yeah, and on one side, I think there is a lot of knowledge gap in terms of general public. They don't really know that's invasive species. It's just so common, and many of them are sold in the nurseries, so they just bought them and plant them in their yard. So I think that is somewhere maybe our project can help, and I would definitely would need more support from experts like you guys.
So what part of the States are you in?
Seattle, Northwest USA.
Yeah, I'm just trying to
Yeah.
think what kind of invasive species you have up there. Probably Japanese knotweed. Everywhere has Japanese knotweed.
We have a lot of blackberries, like
Oh,
non-native blackberry, Himalaya blackberries, and yeah, that's the one I know of. I would love to know all the other invasive species. Yeah.
Okay.
Mm.
Thanks for your input. I think we're approaching the end of this meeting. Is there anything else we should discuss at this point?
then maybe just say to the others who haven't belonged to any of the meetings, maybe how the task group works and
Yes, well, there should be a mailing list. But I think I need to I don't know the English words. Ask again. I think Stan Bloom is taking care of that. So what I'm going to do is after this meeting, I'm going to try to get that one activated because it hasn't been used at this point. In the meantime, you can always send me an email. So if you are interested to join this meeting, or to join the future meetings of this task group, just send me an email. And I hope, like, when Stan gets the time, he can actually get this mailing list started, so you can contact the task group. The task groups are all listed on the TEDWIC page. So if you go to the invasive alien species page, then you will be able to find the contact information there. I'm not sure if I should share the link again to the page on TEDWIC site, or I'm just going to just quickly share it again. I have it open here. It's interesting. I'm going to
I got it, Lynn.
Thanks a lot. Okay, so all the contact information is there on that specific page. So feel free to contact me if you have any other questions or if you want to be involved in the future meetings. Okay, then I think we can wrap it up here.
Thank
Uh,
you. Thank you.
thanks a lot for joining and sharing
Thank you.
your information. And if there's anything, just let me know, and I'm happy to include you in the future meetings. And thanks for attending.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
see you next
Thank you.
time.